Before, after, before, after.
They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hi, Tim.
Ryan McDuffie.
That's me.
Right. Watch out for that scream. See what I did there? I took the George of the Jungle theme and I made it into you.
Oh, scream. Do you have a similar hello song for all our lovely listeners?
Oh my God. On the spot? No. Listeners, you are listening.
Yeah, they are.
Oh!
Yet,
Listen to me scream.
Hopefully not.
That's it.
Too listlessly. We don't want listless listeners. So hopefully that song is. Hopefully that song's a perfect way to offset listlessness among our listeners. Hello, listeners. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, they either continued listening or immediately turned it off.
Or turned it up. Hey, because we're here to party on episode 119 of Dismembering Horror, the podcast show where myself, Ryan Joseph McDuffie, as you may have heard, and...
myself, Timothy Ryan Aslan.
That's right. Two Ryans between us. We talk about what worked for us, what didn't work for us, and anything else we found interesting or noteworthy about a horror film. One that we've been wanting to see, one we've been curious to see, one we've been told to see, one that the ether has told us we should see, or that it thinks we should see. We're meeting the spirit of, hey, how did this work for us? How did this not work for us? Where did we have fun therein? What could we glean from this? All based on the format I just laid out for you.
Hey.
Anything to add there, Tim, about what we're doing here?
Nope. We're just two bros.
Oh, God. doing whatever they know how to do best.
Throwing it up.
Watching horror movies. Great. And we're very happy to have you join us for this. Regardless if you watched the film or not, we hope you did, because that's kind of the spirit of this all. But hey, if not, you're here for the party. Great. That's great too. And for episode 119, we pulled from our hat the film The Thing from Another World from 1951. Woo!
What a year.
Yeah. You remember it well, Tim?
Oh, man. Do I ever. My mom turned 1.
Oh, yeah?
My dad turned 2.
You remember celebrating accordingly?
Oh, it was a joyous occasion.
Great. I wonder if they saw this film as babies. Isn't that a trip, though, to think that they were alive when this movie was a new release?
I mean, barely, but yeah.
They were, though.
They were definitely alive.
You're alive or you're not, Tim. But it's
wow.
It's just,
that is.
No, just think about it. Like your parents, like little baby hands, they're weird. They could have like touched or thrown up on like a newspaper clipping of this film.
Wow. Yeah. They sure could have.
And here is their son 70 years later.
They're probably stuffing their beds with that newspaper because my parents were poor.
Then sleeping on top of the thing from Another World clipping.
That's right.
It's incredible.
Growing up in rural Michigan.
Yeah.
And Wisconsin.
Wow. I feel like that's a perfect place to have seen this movie back when it came out.
Hell yeah. In the cold.
Cold, indeed. Well, Tim, for The Thing from Another World, unless you got anything else to just get us right into it, should we watch the trailer, or you got anything else?
No, but let's watch the trailer because it's so exciting.
Great. All right, here we go. As we said, from 1951, when Tim's parents were little babies, The Thing from Another World.
The Thing from Another World. This is the spot where it was first seen, and these are the first people who saw the thing. How did it get here? Where did it come from? What is it?
That thing's alive, sir. I saw it. I shot at it. I hit it. I know it. Nothing happened. It just kept coming at me, making a noise like a cat mewing. Captain, it was awful. If you could have seen those hands and those eyes. Captain, you've got to do something about it. You've got...
Is it human or inhuman? Earthly or unearthly? Baffling questions, astounding questions that not even the world's greatest scientific minds can answer.
Gentlemen, do you realize what we've found? A being from another world, as different from us as one pole from the other.
A story of modern science that challenges imagination. Just
Damn.
pure, straight up challenges imagination.
Gosh.
That's one of the titles you couldn't read since you're just listening to the trailer or
It
inner
sure
titles
did.
cards.
It challenged everything.
What? Like what?
Plants or people and aliens exist and
Yeah.
and stoic army men versus weird looking science.
Yeah. Take that, science.
Science got a real punch in the old keister.
Well, this did challenge a lot. Think of this, like Psycho is 9 years away. This really was just such the first of its kind. I mean, not that it's like Psycho, but you know what I mean? Just as sort of a greater horror, like...
I will say just if we're going to comment broadly right now, it is so clearly the template for Alien. Oh shit! There was another movie that it made me think of right away, where I was like, "Dude, this is that movie." Alien is a big one, and damn, what's wrong with my brain?
Alien 3.
Yeah, Alien 3. I'll think of it. But yeah, I think it's really cool. You can see how kind of influential this template of like, we're trapped in here and we don't know who to trust, and that sort of thing of the doctor having ulterior motives that are putting his own interests in front of the safety of everybody because of this desire to discover something new.
I mean, of course, yeah, when you look at it that way, I mean, that's, Aliens, the obvious example. But I mean, I thought of just, you were saying, take it even more broadly, of just monster on the loose. Like, this is the template just for that, too.
Yeah.
Which, that's why I think it's so huge, game-changing. 51, it's still fully doing the 50s thing when we're barely out of the 40s. It's so cool. Well, Tim, we watched the trailer, so next up we got to rate it per our rating system. Would Tim tell Tim to avoid it, stream it, rent it, or buy it?
It's a classic, obviously, and it's got some really incredible stuff in it. But to be honest, for me, like, as a whole, like, as a movie overall, I don't think it's great. Like, right, like, in sort of the most overall sense, like, if I were to sit down and be like, oh, I want to, just like from a popcorn sort of sit down, watch a movie, because I feel like that's what this was geared toward when it came out. I don't think it's that great. It has some really amazing highlights, for sure. But, like, you don't even see the monster until minute 57. You know what I mean? Which is
Tim's like,
good and
boo,
bad.
show us the monster.
Like, it's an 87-minute movie, right? Like, I get it. That sort of Jaws does the same thing, and the tension of that is a lot of the movie. But, I don't know. It's a rent. It's a solid rent.
Great. I also gave it a
Am
solid
I yelling?
Ren.
I feel like I'm yelling. What am
You're
I
always,
doing?
You're always yelling, Tim.
Jesus.
Just drink more of your yell juice.
Mama needs a juice.
He's drinking his yelling juice, his rock star, finishing can number 3.
I had 3 cans the other day. What a mistake.
Dude,
I didn't even know I did it.
you're going to be busting through windows like the Thing from Another World. Roar!
Oh, man,
Yes.
that door behind me is looking really flimsy.
I know it's going to burst in. Yes, Tim, I agree. I gave it a rent it. More so, I guess, yeah, I kind of shared your thoughts. I guess maybe, yeah, we are pretty on the same page of where, like, sheer, like, entertainment, it didn't quite scratch the same itch to push it into buy it territory as, let's say, another 50s sci-fi horror film that we watched, Fiend Without a Face.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, like, I definitely tell myself to rent it for things I did really love about it. I'd be down to see it again. But just me being me, telling me to rent it, I'd just do that just for the historical, reasons
Absolutely.
alone. Film history. And within there, too, there is more film history. It's easy for me to slip into the mode of saying, oh, we're just talking about movies here, folks. That's it. But there's so much embedded in cultures of film. And I think it's neat to look at this period historically. It's always interested me, sort of coming out of World War II, all that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of that. I mean, there's a reason that this movie is, like, in your film studies class.
Yeah, whether it's, that can be, whether the overlap or what it has to say about outside of film history, but then just for the film history itself of, like, what we already said, Monster on a Loose, all that good fun stuff. It's the first of.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm glad we watched it. The Thing from Another World. So we got to summarize it, Tim.
Okay. You want me to do that?
I don't know. Do you want me to do that?
No, I'll do it.
Okay.
Let's see. A U.S. Air Force base in Anchorage, and exploring territory in the Arctic near the North Pole, gets summoned to a scientific outpost because of an anomalous reading on their whatever, their Geiger counter stuff. And so they
it's beeping, sir.
Yep. And so they go out there and they discover a flying saucer has crash landed in the Arctic and is embedded in the ice. How amazing. Theremins abound. And as as 50s military are wont to do, they blow it up. But they were
Incredible.
trying to just melt the ice, but they blow it up anyway. And they discover a spaceman. And so he's embedded in the ice, and they bring him back. You guys know this story. It's like, it's the Thing. What the hell? But anyway, they bring him back to the base, or the little outpost, and they science it up. And then he gets loose because somebody put an electric blanket over the ice because he didn't want to look at the weird body in the ice. And the electric blanket was on, guys. Like, come on. And it melts the ice, and then the Thing is on the loose. And he just wreaks havoc on everyone. And, and then they have to figure out how to kill it.
What's going on with
the science officer, like the main doctor, he doesn't want to kill it. He wants to study it and, like, become friends with it because he knows that it's more intelligent than them, and this is like the discovery of a lifetime. Also, there's a journalist there who wants a big scoop.
Right. So that was my question I was going to ask, what the characters were up to. But I'll also point out the scientist is at one point he's willing to say that they should all sacrifice themselves so this thing can live, so other people can study it.
That feels very like 50s Cold War paranoia. The Russians are infecting our brains and going to populate the world, like with their thought experience, whatever weapons of like the idea has infected the Doctor, and now he wants to let it populate out into the world and destroy all of the things that are good. Anyway.
Right. Well, and we'll also mention, so you mentioned Scotty's the reporter.
Right.
We got him going on, and then we got kind of like a little love story of something going on with Captain Patrick Hendry and Nikki Nicholson.
Nikki Nicholson.
So Tim, quiz time, Tim.
Okay, go for it.
Name all of the characters from our previous episode Climax, and name all the characters from The Thing from Another World.
Nikki, Bobby, Billy, Sally, Jenny, Fred, George, Dr. Zhivago, Billy. Did I say Billy? Billy, Stevie, yes. Georgie. Shit, I don't know.
Great. So now how about the characters from The Thing from Another World?
That was both.
Okay.
They're all the same.
Just noting, like, yeah, we've had these two recent episodes where it's like a big ensemble and you just don't know any of their names. It's just funny.
Yeah, it is funny. This movie is... There's some really sort of interesting nuances to this movie that are... I don't even know what to think of them. Just like... I don't know if they were choices or they were like... I don't know. It's. We'll get into it.
Well, and lastly, just to mention for our summary, in case you didn't know, or if it seems obvious in horror circles, but this was the original film, The Thing, that then the John Carpenter Thing was based on, and then it's all based on a book. So,
yeah,
there you go.
I kind of want to. It's a little short book, isn't it? I feel like it's like a novella. Yeah. I think I should grab that.
Grab it. I'm sure it's available at your local library, Tim. And you live so close to the Los Feliz branch. You can just get any book sent there. It's the one I go to.
Oh, yeah, the library. Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, a little shout out for libraries, folks. All right, Tim. Well, I'm sure there's plenty that did work for us. So should we get into that section?
Yeah, we should.
All right, here we go. What worked?
What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Tim, I did love a lot about this movie, Tim.
Yeah, me too.
I got the top of my list, perhaps the dialogue, like what they were saying itself and how they were saying it, like the overlapping dialogue. It's like there's a couple other filmmakers from this era that kind of do that, and I just love that so much. And you can see Howard Hawks, he didn't direct this but produced it. You can see that's his style, and that how it goes on to influence John Carpenter and other, of Carpenter's contemporaries. I just know Howard Hawks has that reputation.
Yeah.
But that dialogue, man, I just want to bite it and chew on it. You know what I mean? It's just so good.
I do. It's
funny.
It's so, that's kind of what I was referring to. It's so stylized, and it almost made me feel like, I was like, it's almost a detriment to the film in a weird way, because it's hard to follow along because I had this moment where I was like, this overlapping and like super fast and basically like mumbled by a lot of people. Like they're not enunciated. They're just like, and I was like, what's the point of that? Like if it were a choice, what's the effect that it's having? And there's a part of me that thinks that was very purposeful to give us this sense of confusion and to like feel a little off kilter, that we can't quite wrap our our brains around like anything because they're in this situation, and maybe that was all a purposeful choice. And then there was part of me that was like, or nobody really knew their lines and they're just like getting the gist out and just like flying through it. And they're like, this is like the actors are just like, this is another stupid sci-fi movie. I wish I hadn't gotten cast in this, like blah, blah, blah. Let's just like wing it and throw our lines away constantly. No, and I'm like, I honestly don't know which it is, but like either way, it has an effect and I kind of like it.
Great. I'm glad you like it, but I got to push back on a couple aspects there. I think the actors, it feels like they're only having fun and enjoying working on this film, and that comes through.
I agree with that.
And then the dialogue itself, I was with you for the description up until like I wouldn't say mumbling is like a primary factor. Like
I would say that the lead guy, he borderline mumbles all of his lines.
I could understand him just fine. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
maybe I need my ears checked.
I don't have great hearing either. Sorry, I didn't mean to like push back there. I'm not. Whatever. No, just say it's the overlapping quality. It just gave it this like hangout movie sense, you know, in a way where it was fun to kind of be with them, learn about this all, and they're referring to things that just happened. Like. Yeah, the style as well as the words they're saying. It's just you can tell they're fun to say, so it's fun to listen to, and it's not too like, hey, zing bab, gotcha.
No, I agree with that. It has this other quality to it that is almost, I don't really know how to define it. It's, you know what, it's almost like they were told to not act, which is great. Like, yes, great direction. But as a result, you have everybody kind of being like, wait, what? We're not supposed to do the thing? Like the thing that we normally do, which is that very stylized, like mid-Atlantic dialect sort of like, hey, everybody, we're in a film. And like, and that is inherently... That style is very, very fast paced. Like you chew out the dialogue in that style, and it almost feels to me like they were having, and I think they were. I agree with you. They were having fun with it, but they were kind of caught in the middle a little bit of like, this is different than what we normally do.
It was a leap of faith for sure. On their part.
But it does work because it honestly makes you feel a part of the group. Right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Everybody's just
hangout
movie.
It's
so conversational and so sort of like loose that's good. I just felt like I was missing stuff.
And it's funny too.
It is funny, yeah.
I was laughing throughout it. They're funny. The jokes were funny.
Like, it's so quick-witted and so like facile.
Yeah.
That I was like, and you know what it is too? They're not playing the joke at all. They're like deadpanning it.
Like the example when he asks about some specific like army code, and you know is like, oh, can you explain it via army code? And he gives off this long
it's like it's like Article 369 of Section 129778300000 subsection 00003, and he's like, hey, yeah, what was that article number again? And it's dry, I think, is what it is.
Well, he kind of gives the response like, oh yeah, that one. Kind of like
right, exactly. It does have a little bit of that feel that they were kind of commenting on military, like, what would you call it? Like camaraderie.
Yeah,
you know, that is the sort of vibe of that, of there's almost a cynicism within that because we've just come out of World War II.
Well, it's like throwing hard optimism to combat cynicism. Like, here they are, they could all be dead, killed off by this monster. They all know it. Yeah, what are they going to do? They come up with the plan and they execute it, and hey, they're going to make jokes along the way. You know, like
yeah. I mean, in a way, it's that standard, I guess, almost gallows humor sort of thing that you do find in the military, which is very appropriate.
Well, yeah, because they're simply like something that a lot of us, you know, it's aspire to in life. Is when you're in the Army like that. I mean, I can't speak to it, but you're so clearly a part of a mission. A part of something greater. So they're just kind of they're just doing it. They're living their life and they're gonna crack jokes along the way. It's fun.
I like how everything in the first like 20 minutes of the movie is like about women.
Yeah.
It's like really setting the stage that they're like talking about dames and you know, beautiful girls and all this stuff. It's like they are lonely.
Yeah, man.
Which is good. Like, it's smart, right? It's like reinforce that sense of isolationism that this movie is kind of about, right?
It's just kind of smart to acknowledge it too, because I mean, we're obviously thinking about it. It's like 18 dudes living with 2 women. You know, it's hard not to just wonder about the dynamics. When we're talking about the dialogue style and how you're saying like, you know, I took it to mean as when you said like they were told not to act, that meant in terms of that very typical 40s, 30s coming out of silent films kind of hyped up acting. So what's so cool about what that allows for is when you did have moments in this film that were, let's say, like those lines of the sort of lines that have more a little more drama behind them, or you know, have the music cue along with them saying it, bum bum bum. It gave those moments more weight because because of the style that's been established of a more know, quote unquote realistic or natural or whatever. So like, just to jump way to the end, where when we fade to the end of the movie, the last lines are the reporter. We like along the way. He's finally, you know, gotten a hold of the mainland and is kind of warning the world about what just happened. And he's saying, watch the skies, keep looking, look for the skies. And it's just so cool. I love that last line, and just how he was giving it gave me chills. And it wouldn't have been the same if it was along the way you sort of had this sort of over dramatized style, but it made it so it was just like, oh, it felt real when he's delivering this message with that kind of conviction.
I think that's a really good point and a really good, like, important sort of lesson in directing actors. Because, like, you have to pick and choose when you want things to be to really land. And if your actors are constantly trying to chew up the scenery in every single moment of the film, it undercuts the moments that really matter. And so, like, it's good directors will know when to be like, hey, just throw it away, let it go. Like, you don't need to fucking win an Oscar on every single line of this film. And a lot of actors, you know, I think they're really eager to put their stamp on a thing, and that's great. But it's the director's job to kind of reel them in a little bit at various times and just be like, hey, you can just exist and we are interested, right? Like, you do not have to, you can just deliver the pizza. You don't have to make a thing out of it. Just deliver the pizza. It's okay to do that. And a lot of the time, to your point, it's really, really good to have those moments as a counterpoint to the times that serious shit is going down in your story.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's cool.
God, loved those last lines and how he was saying it. So good.
Yeah.
Watch the skies. Watch the skies. I mean, how about just any other overall things? How about the music with the theremin?
Love it. I wonder too,
great.
you know, when was the first, do we know when the first sort of use of the theremin came into film?
I don't think anyone knows that.
I bet somebody does it. I'm going to look it up.
I was just being a smartass. I think this was probably one of the first ones. I mean, again, like 1951. It's hard to imagine stuff earlier.
I know.
Doing it.
Well, it's great. I think the setting is, to me, there's just something so, and maybe this is a product of kind of, I don't know, watching movie. I don't know what it is, where this comes from. The isolation settings, in particular Arctic settings, are always really, really pleasing to me. I don't know what it is. There's something. I think maybe it's a product of that feeling of it's off-world. It's not. It's so unfamiliar to us. But there's also, like, for me, maybe a nostalgia because I grew up in the cold, right? Like, winters were long and snowy, and you spent a lot of time trying to make do and make some fun out of that. But, like, I love a, like, snow-covered, barren landscape. I don't know why. I don't want to be in it, but I love it. Like, it's really nostalgic to me. So just that in and of itself, and of course the whole conceit of, like, we're out here alone, trapped. There's nowhere to go. It's not like we can leave. We can't just, like, go around the corner and be safe. Like, we're it. There's nothing out there. So
yeah,
to me, that kind of setup, and I, like, you know, every time I sit down to try and, you know, come up with a story, like a horror story in particular, it's one of the first things I think of. Like, how do I isolate the characters so that we get that sense of, oh, they're screwed, they're trapped. And I think good horror knows how to do that. Obviously, it's not applicable to every type of horror, but, you know, the ones that it is, it's so important to get that right.
Just knowing you, I'm trying to think of, like, why that maybe. I mean, it's a pretty universal thing, but
totally
knowing you, I'm wondering, is it the aspect of how it forces people to all confront something and work together?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think that it's sort of a metaphor for, like, you can't escape the realities of your life or your situation. Like, you have to face it.
Yep.
It's so, like, that to me is important.
You got to work together and use your wits, your physical prowess. You got to use everything you've got to defeat the thing.
That's right. The thing.
Let's just get on to some moments therein then when it's just so cool and classic when they find it under the ice and measure it out by standing in a circle.
Yeah.
Like, let's get a sense of the shape and size of this thing. And we see it's the perfect circle. And it's like, it's so funny because in my mind, you know, I'm imagining, like, oh, they're going to be so skeptical to call it a UFO and blah, blah, blah. But no, pretty right away, it's like, it's a circle. It's a UFO. We found a UFO. You know, we found a spaceship.
Like, what'd they think it was up to that point?
Right. I mean, they think, you know, the thing sticking up, they think it's a plane. It's got that little fin.
That's true. Yeah, they kind of think it could be a Russian.
Yeah, but the mood.
Spy something.
You're right. The mood is for sure. Like, they're all thinking it. We found a UFO, guys. And then, like you said in the summary, it's just so funny. And it's like typical, not in a movie way, but how they blow it up. Like, just that these army dudes just like, they're just like, well, how do we get it out? They just accidentally blow it up while just trying to get it out. It's so just like, of course, guys. And then what's so smart, though, just like an example what we're talking about, the movie itself is smart. It's funny. Almost keeps it going as a running gag because then they get, after they blow it up without receiving orders, then they hear later they get their official orders to try to do exactly what they did and use explosives to get it out. So we're kind of like, whoa, we dodged a bullet there as far as you know, being culpable about blowing it up. But then they even laugh about it later. One of them's like, "Can you believe it? You know, we blew up the spaceship. We lost the alien. There were a bunch of Butterfingers." They call themselves like a bunch
That's right.
bunch of Butterfingers. I just love it.
God.
They acknowledge it. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. Yeah, you know, overall, it does. It moves at a pretty good pace. Like, I didn't find a lot of the time with these sort of pre-60s movies, I find myself kind of drifting away and being like, okay, let's get on with it. This doesn't really do that, that's kind of remarkable, to be honest.
They're going from room to room enough, you know?
Yeah.
They're
Even
keeping
in
it
this
going.
sort of like, there's only so many rooms in this location, and yet we still feel like a sense of sort of urgency and things are moving along.
I like the big rec room that they have. That's like their main hangout space.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a lodge, it felt like.
Yeah, totally. What else? I mean, I think most of the characters are pretty... They're well defined, even though they're weirdly nondescript. Like, we don't know any of them, but we kind of know them just implicitly. Yeah, implicitly. Like, you know, I don't know any of their names, but there's like the blondish guy who's sort of a second in command dude, and there's like the third in command buddy of his that's got darker hair and is younger, and you know what I mean? Like, you kind of get this vibe from them, and a lot of that comes from the style of the dialogue. Obviously, the reporter has a very specific role. The doctor is very well defined, and the lead dude, very much, I don't know if you felt this way, but he's got that same thing we've seen before where it's like, shoot first, ask questions later, man. Just like go guns a-blazing in. And, you know, for the most part, for me, that works. That character works.
I will say, more. Yeah, maybe another trait he has that's, I don't know, I won't want to say it's, why he's not totally the same as that trait or other characters like that we've talked about. Why he's not quite Jack Bauer territory.
No, he's not there.
He seems to me more like the very chain of command type of guy.
Yes.
Like, yeah, he's sort of executing his certitude, in that kind of just, this is how it is. It's dangerous to us. We got to kill it away. But no, he seems very like all under, no, this is just army protocol, and that is it more so an extension of that.
Well, and he has this other quality, too, that makes us like him, I think, which is he is by the book chain of command guy, but when you step out of line in that, he's not an asshole about it. He just goes, hey, come on.
Yeah.
He just sort of brushes away. He's like, let's take it easy.
Captain Patrick Hendry.
Like, you see it in the first scene when they're playing cards. And they start to get a little too kind of fraternizing about women and about his personal life. And he unemotionally just puts a kibosh on it. He goes, yeah, we're not doing that.
Right.
And they kind of go, sorry, sir. And he's like, no worries.
Yeah.
It's an interesting character, like kind of, I don't know how to... He at times feels wooden to me, but also I like him. It's very strange. I don't quite get him.
Right. The moment where I was afraid he was going to lose me, I loved the moment, but then I was like, okay, he didn't end up doing what I thought he might have done that was so bad, was when they discover the UFO, and it's the press guy, the reporter guy, and he's just rightfully so, I think, like, man, I got to get on the line and tell the world. This is one of the biggest discoveries, And then he gets pushback from our boy we were just talking about, Captain Patrick Hendry, where he's like, no, we got to, wait for orders before we can tell the world kind of thing. And they have this back and forth on that. And I guess to continue with what I was saying about how that was making me feel about the captain, I was worried it was going to be taken to the point where he like locks up the reporter or gets
Sure.
just like crazy about it. No, you can't tell him. But no, they just kind of was like, just kind of let it be in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
It's almost in a weird way. It's like, it's a little counterintuitive because he kind of diffuses conflict throughout the movie. And like, as a rule, you don't really want that, right? Like in storytelling, we are told conflict is good. Like press on the gas any chance you can. Like that's what the scene is. And this guy kind of he's diffusing it. And I don't know why it works, but it does. I think it's because we're in this situation where it's like cooler heads need to prevail.
Well, yeah, but I mean, yeah. But I mean, the larger aspect, I think, why it's still working is because you have such a concentrated other conflict, which is
right
figuring out the monster. You know, you can kind of do anything as long as that is your driving force, which it just inherently is for this kind of setup.
Yeah, he is a little bit. I think there's a lack of nuance in the writing of characters of this era. Whereas, like, you know, this would be an interesting thing to kind of map out historically in film. But, like, there's this shift that happened, I would say, in the 60s, where we start to really actually get commentary from the character about how they feel about a thing. Whereas like I'm making these numbers up to a certain degree. This is generalized. But like pre-60, I feel like the vast majority of characters, you never see them admit that they have a conflict within themselves to other characters. You know, they never say, listen, I'm fucking conflicted too. This is hard for me, and I'm trying to figure it out. You almost never saw that kind of thing.
I feel like you do, but it's just kind of, it will always be the moment where it's the moment they kind of break down.
Sure,
you know,
if it's
this
there,
is how
yeah,
I've been feeling. You want to hear it? You want to hear what I'm actually thinking? Here it is.
Right. And it's always this overt thing. Whereas, like, you know, if you just look at the John Carpenter's thing, you get those moments. In fact, most of the movie is those moments, right? Of the characters being like, "What the fuck? Like, what are we what are we supposed to do? I'm confused. I don't know how to respond. This is crazy."
Well,
and you don't get that shit at all in this. They're
no,
like,
here's Tim,
here we go. There's a thing. We got to deal with it.
What happens in this movie is they nip it in the bud, I think is the expression, where you have the one character who is freaking out, and then he has his little rant where he's accidentally like still holding his gun up, just pointed in front of him, doesn't even realize it, but he's ranting. He's like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do? I saw it. It was horrible, blah, blah." And then he gets the water thrown in his face.
Yes.
So it's like, that's their attitude to that.
Fucking long.
It's like
when that happened.
It's like, hey man, that's not going to help us all here.
Yep.
You know, it's kind of, and that is very Kurt Russell. Like I'd see him doing that. He almost played that role in the 80s one of just like, hey, just keep it together all.
Right.
You know, like,
yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting just from a stylistic point of view, how things have changed and how we depict character and like internal struggle. Like we don't really see internal struggle in any overt way in these movies.
I mean, just sign of your times. Look at it as like succumbing to toxic masculinity in terms of admitting to your feelings or not.
Yeah, that you're allowed to have feelings, and that we as filmmakers or storytellers are allowed to write characters that are allowed to express the fact that they actually have feelings.
Yeah.
It's cool. I mean, it's cool to like step back and see how that has evolved. Because like there's nothing inherently bad about the depictions of these characters in this movie.
Well, it's fun because like
They're just painted in broad strokes.
Well, it's broad strokes, but you can be more specific and say, like, it's the kind of thing I think we're still struggling with, but you see, it's not that their feelings of like being hurt or maybe those sort of more vulnerable feelings like aren't on display at all. It's that they are like at the time, and like what still is, and still plenty of us do, it's expressed through these masculine traits like anger and force, yada yada, freaking out, yelling. So, but as soon as you can make that association of, oh, that is just, that's not being tough, those are an admittance of feeling vulnerable, then I don't know, you see how we're still humans all along the way.
Right. I mean, we do. It took me a minute to kind of go wrap my head around why we have this pseudo love story, because it is not focused on really at all. It is super like side, just material. And I thought to myself, like, initially I was like, what do we do? Like, why is this even in this movie? What purpose is it serving? Because this is not a story about their relationship at all. Like, she never becomes like the damsel in distress. There's none of that. He's not like saving her. It's not a critical component to this story. And so I was like, well, why is it even there? And I think what I've arrived at, and in particular in relation to what we've just been saying, it's sort of this tool that they're using to show that Captain Pat has a personality, and that he has depth to him and emotions that he isn't really allowed to show. And so you get these things where you get to see like the softer side of Pat, right? Like he sneaks into her office alone to be like, yo, why'd you stand me up, man? That like kind of hurt my feelings. And like, I kind of like you. Like, what are we going to do? And you're like, oh, wait, that's this dude too? All right. Like,
yeah, no, we
cool.
And through her eyes, we see who he is, because she clearly knows who he really is. They're intimate that way.
Now, from a, I guess a counterpoint kind of critical standpoint, it would have been nice to have her actually be a character and not a caricature of a 50s woman, which is just like super throwaway. She's just there to service the plot of this dude, or the emotional well-being of this dude. Be that as it may, that was standard fare, so we could criticize it, but like, eh.
Yeah, I have some observations on it I saved for things of note.
Cool. So what else? All right, let's get to the meat and potatoes here.
What do you think we've been doing?
James Arness as the thing, the titular thing.
Of course.
This motherfucker.
I just thought of you like every time the monster screamed. Roar!
Bro, I cannot describe to you like I even need to. Every time the thing appears, all I did was start yelling.
Yes, it's so good.
Every fucking time it like came around a corner and like stood there, because it's really not doing much. Every time I was like, oh! Every time, without fail. There was like, I couldn't contain myself.
Well, yeah, because I mean, there's so much buildup, and when you first see it, it's so casual. It's like they open a door and it's just there. He's just there, and he's like, he's like an oafish dude monster who's a plant or whatever. It's just so good. It's so and his sounds he makes are just like, yeah, that's exactly your Swamp Thing impression. It's one and the same,
Yes.
Like, but it's just, I mean, not only is it just great without, just viscerally how it makes you feel, but to kind of dismember a bit as we do here, something that tickles me about it, it's like, this is how 1950s people imagined. This is the monster they came up with. These are the choices that they made for creating the thing.
I know.
It's so fun.
What's it's so fascinating to me, because there is this aspect of like, just on its surface, like if you look at him, you go, who's that? You go, it's Frankenstein, really. I mean, it's like big head, big dude, like lumbering around, kind of slow, nonverbal, just noise dude.
Yeah, he especially looks like how Frankenstein's monster is in, like, is it the third one where he's just like wearing a burlap sack or whatever?
Yeah. But they're like, but let's juice him up a little bit and give him claws. Rad, like fucking radical. Yeah. Hell yeah. But he really is just aesthetically, he's Frankenstein with claws. And that's cool. He's in a jumpsuit,
and then more of his rules, he can regenerate. You chop off a hand, he grows it back.
Right. That's awesome.
Because he's a plant.
Yes. And so, yeah, that's the thing. He's a plant. He's a plant-based organism rather than I guess, like, it's not carbon, but he's not a mammal, right? Like, his cellular structure is more akin to, like, plant cells.
You mean, Tim, just say it, a carrot. That's what they call him.
Yeah, he's a carrot. He's a big carrot.
Yeah.
That's one big carrot. So I really like it. Like, all around, I like it for the movie. And James Arness is, he's sort of famous for, he was like a cowboy dude in one of the, I think it was the Big Valley, or maybe it was Gunsmoke. I forget. He's like the sheriff of the town in one of those TV shows that I would watch on Sundays at like 2 p.m. But they're sort of doing the vampire thing as well, right? Because he feeds off of blood specifically. And then they're also setting the stage for, like, again, like Alien, with this sort of pod thing where he has planted his own, I guess, his little seeds, right? He's got seeds in his hand. They pull a seed out of the hand, the dismembered arm that they find that the dogs have, like, chewed off, has a little seed in the palm of it. And he ultimately finds the greenhouse in their, outpost and plants a bunch of those, and then, or wait, does he plant them or does the doctor?
It's so hard to imagine him just gingerly planting these little plants.
Man, now I'm confused.
I just can't imagine
one initially.
I can't imagine the monster intentionally planting them. It's just too funny. It's too funny to imagine the monster's the one planting them.
The doctors steal the plasma and they feed the plant. And they populate, and they do this little experiment of, like, and they're little pod things, and they say, remember, they, like, listen in, and it's like, oh, it sounds like a baby or something like that in the pod, which is a weird, freaky whole concept. But I was just like, dude, this is Alien. Like, this is the same. There's something inherently creepy about pod things. And the what do you call it? Where the populating the world with these monsters through this sort of plant growth pod thing, really freaky and really cool. So all in all, even though it does feel a little bit like they're pulling a lot of elements and putting them into one monster, I'm down with it.
Because when it comes down to it, it's just a big thing going, oh.
That's right. Yeah. What it makes me think, too, which is sort of, this is conjecture, to say the least. But think about, remember the beginning of Prometheus? The sort of prequel to Alien?
It is a prequel to Alien, whether we like it or not.
The initial... What do they call them? The makers or something like that, or whatever they call those characters, but the big white dudes,
I know.
right? The big white dudes, that design is this design. And it almost makes me feel like there's deeply, because remember we talked about Alien being kind of a ripoff of Planet of the Vampires, right? Like,
yeah.
And you argued that that's just in the storytelling sort of ether, right? And I'm down with that argument. And I think that can apply here, where it's just like we are all just, as storytellers, we're pulling from these inspirations, consciously or unconsciously, or collective consciously, whatever it is. But you see these repeated things, and I think it's really fascinating where you see these images and these sort of, these story elements passed down, in particular through horror over the years. And
Absolutely.
I feel like this movie is like, it's like the Buddy Holly to the Beatles to the, like it set the stage for all of the great things to come afterwards. And I think that's why we keep coming back to it, like as film people. Because we go, wait, what's the origin of this stuff? It's this shit. Or it's, or it's like the Innocents, or it's, what was the one, the House on the Cliff one that we watched with the haunted house on the cliff?
The Uninvited.
Like those are all like the precursors and the setups and the inspirations for all this great art in horror that came afterwards. And
the OGs.
I just love going back to them and seeing kind of like where at least the origins of inspiration kind of started. It's cool.
Absolutely. And it's, especially neat when those lead to new things entirely, like things that feel entirely new unto themselves. Like look at everything that is in this that's embedded in John Carpenter's remake, but then look at what John Carpenter's remake did for that kind of effects work, and just like what that is, everything that is that this movie so isn't, it's yet they're still so intertwined. It's kind of incredible how high you can jump given off a springboard.
Yeah, it's cool. It makes me want to watch some of these other ones. I don't know if like the original Blob is in our hat, but
Tim, it is.
Oh, good. And
actually, I'm pretty excited coming up because we have a lot of, I get excited for the pre-2000 ones, and we have a lot of those coming up. And no, I did make a specific point. I went through like to certain lists and of like 40s, 50s horror and tried to add stuff I wanted to see. You mentioned it kind of in maybe it was in the summary, but the idea there, or like, no, coming off of the trailer, the imagination, it's challenging or whatever. The idea in there of intelligence in plants is so cool. The idea of a plant person that it's like, like plants have their intelligence, fungus has their intelligence, and the idea that involves to something that's a humanoid, just it gets to us in the same way that I think like people are afraid of reptiles or whatever. But it's great because he gives those examples in the movie where it's like, well, what about, haven't you heard of the so-and-so vine that can communicate to each other across hundreds of miles? He gives us, or this, the man-eating type of plants. It's so cool. It's so cool.
It's an important sort of outlook or concept to remind ourselves that we, as considered the sentient sort of like top of the food chain beings, does not mean that we are the superior and only intelligent beings. And how you look at what intelligence is, you need to break down the paradigm that you view intelligence through and realize that like these examples are really important, right? Like plants have their own paradigm of existing, and along with that comes things like their version of intelligence, their version of communication, their version of emotion or like interaction or like how they respond to the environment or to things, whatever it may be. And that's a really trippy rabbit hole to go down, because I think it's important for us to start to look at that and go, oh, right, there's a different way to view the living and even the non-living, but the living things around us. Like, without anthropomorphizing them, right? Like, or like humanizing them. That's
right,
not what it's about.
As if that's a sign of intelligence. Like,
exactly.
I think of plants, mushrooms, like maybe, in so many words, you know what I mean, as like pure intelligence, as pure consciousness, pure sentience in a way, you know, like, and even to humanize them a bit, like, have you ever watched, like, seen fast motion or not fast, but time lapse footage of plants?
Yeah.
Here's
so
my
cool.
impression of them. It's like, you can't see it listening, but they're like these blooby little dudes. They're just
dancing, yo.
Yeah, they're just like doing the thing, and they'll react. They'll touch each other. They'll react.
You know what they're
if
like?
You touch them.
They're like a really slowed down version of burners. Like Burning Man people. They're just vibing it, yo.
Yeah,
they're like, the sun's out.
Woo! And you bump up against one, it might move a little bit. God, yeah, I just got that like that nervous horror feeling of like, all the plants in my room are listening.
Oh my God. It's like in The Happening. You remember that movie?
Yes, of course.
It's the worst, but I also contest that it is actually supposed to be a comedy. But that's neither here nor there. But the plants, man, yeah.
The plants.
What are they thinking?
Roar!
But I think, and that's like a long held sort of horror trope too, like the sentient plant like taking over, or like the vines coming to get us. Like, it's in Evil Dead. It's, it's in Swamp Thing. It's like nature,
Jumanji.
Like nature having this sort of like having had enough with our bullshit and finally saying, you know what, we're gonna do something about that, is kind of the scary thing. And it shouldn't be. It should just keep us like going, well, yeah, maybe we should be a little more harmonious with nature. And
I mean, you're just talking about real life now. Like,
I am.
That's what, yeah. But I mean, it's so not a stretch. Like, we
but it's such
put out things that are bad, and Mother Nature knows it and not reciprocates, will fight back.
And that's why it's so good in horror.
Yeah.
Is because it's like cautionary tale shit.
Yeah. So it's just,
don't be a jerk. Or else the plants are going to stick their branch up your butt.
What's tricky is that is a collective that we're, having to tell, don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
And it's often not the individuals, but the long-stead corporations and way of doing things with the fixations in power.
My buddy said something to me yesterday that I thought was kind of sadly profound. Because I was complaining about how there are these people out in the world who just, they're opportunists, and they gain a following through division and blah, 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 right? And they earn a living off of it, right? Like, they make a lot of money. And I was moaning about it, and his response is, it's really easy to make money without principles. And I was like, ugh, no! It's true, but it's awful. So I think we, on the other side of that, need to keep fighting the good fight, so to speak, to be like, in our realm, let's make art that points at this and gets people thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I believe in my heart that is a tide that is changing, and this idea of, you see it already in these businesses 3.0. Oh, you just do things for a good reason and treat your workers well and blah, blah, blah. All these things that should be obvious.
Novel idea.
You're actually making more money in the end in a sustainable way. And
I used to say this.
That's
this is
the human
so
endeavor,
but sort of not. I used to say this to the GMs and owners of the bars I used to help manage, I didn't help manage, I managed them. I used to be like, you guys have to, it cannot be an us against them in terms of the employees. You can't like rule with this sort of hard line idea, because they will steal from you. They don't, like, this is a bar job. They're waiters and they're servers and bartenders and barbacks. Like, why act like the tough guy in the situation? It doesn't breed an environment that's going to make you more money. What's going to make you more money is if you accommodate them, empower them to feel like they have a say in things. They'll be nicer to the customers. The customers will stay longer and spend more money. They'll make more money and the business will make more money. It's not rocket science. It's really straightforward stuff. Just be cool and you will benefit from it. And how that concept is lost on so many people because of, I think, honestly, to wrap it back around to this movie, this sort of trope of toxic masculinity of like, no, we got to be a tough guy. We got to be, a hardline tough guy, shoot first, ask questions later, because we don't want to diminish our status in the hierarchy of things.
It's funny because I thought you were going to tie it back to this movie in the exact opposite way. We're saying Captain Patrick Henry is cool and has the respect of everyone he works with.
Well, that is sort of my point in that this movie sets that premise of the hardline tough guy thing, and then shows us that there is an alternative, that we can get through it if we sort of band together and don't let what would you call the sort of the doctor's weakness is that he's ignoring the human side of things for the sake of this idea of gaining profit, I guess, in a way, from this experience. And we get to see that, those things put up against each other. And when he tries to appeal to the monster or the thing's intelligence or whatever, the thing just knocks him out of the way. It's like, yo, no, you're coming at it from the wrong angle, dude.
I loved that part.
Yeah, that moment is really like telling.
Well, and it's not definitive, because maybe this thing wouldn't have hit him had they not just been trying to blow him up the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, to his point.
Yeah, and
like,
so
I love that one line where he runs on and says, or one of them goes like, keep in mind, from this thing's perspective, all it's been through is it's got out of ice. It was attacked by dogs. It was shot at. It was set on fire. Like, What do you think it's thinking?
Yeah, it's a little too late. Like, the olive branch burnt up with the ship, dude.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool to realize that underneath the seemingly kind of black and white, no pun intended, but black and white concepts that are presented in the film, there's a bunch of layers of nuance that do exist.
Yeah, like, I like looking at it as like seeing that there's all these values that we think are sort of definitive end things, whether it be like the current one that it has to be socialism versus capitalism, as if those aren't things that can work in tandem, kind of thing. Like the Red Scare, all that, what I'm saying, communism versus whatever.
Right.
But the ideas behind this one of sort of the science, what the scientist represents, and then what the captain represents, there's truth to where they're both coming from. But where I like where this one sort of comes down on is the kind of like the anti-Thanos trait of like, okay, yeah, no, that may be true. Like, that population overgrowth has something to do with the problem, but the way to get to a better future is never by harming people in the immediate now,
Yeah.
What I'm saying? So yeah, in the context of this, it's like, no, like, yeah, scientist dude, yeah, you're right. This is a great discovery for humanity, but it doesn't mean we have to like kill people along the way or sacrifice ourselves. There's our humanity, buddy.
Well, there's sort of a thesis, I think, slightly buried in this film that is really that being measured and not allowing our weaker sort of, impulses to take it over and then divide us because of the fear of working together. Because that's what happens, right? Like, the problems really get going in this movie when the doctor and his buddies discover the dog that has been left in the little cupboard in the greenhouse room. And the other scientists, doctor guys, say we should tell everybody. And the main doctor goes, no, we shouldn't. We should keep it to ourselves, and we'll hold our own little experiment because we're the scientists and they're the military guys. And we shouldn't overlap with each other because it'll just cause problems. That's wrong. And Captain Pat literally says this afterwards. He's like, why did you keep this from me? We need to work together. The consequences of you keeping this from all of us was that your dudes got killed. They're hanging upside down, drained of blood in the other room. Like, what's your problem, man? And so there's this sort of underlying thesis of we're in it together, right? Like, whatever the thing is, we need to consider each other as a group first and help each other out rather than division and, kind of running off to the races of our own needs or our own individual desires. And the thing, in a weird way, kind of represents this individualism problem, right? He's on his own and he's being inundated with all sorts of shit just coming his way. If he was in a group, they might be able to sort of be like,
a whole little group of family of things.
But, communication often is better served through a group dynamic if it's measured, right? Because you can come to a group consensus and say, okay, what's best? Let's discuss it and come to a conclusion. Rather than one person standing up there and being like, my way, the best way, fall in line, everybody. Which is why dictators don't really work.
Yep.
Right? So there's a lot going on. And I think that